Hello guys! Welcome back to my channel. A channel that discusses very dramatic movie stories, guys. In this video, I'll take you to watch a very dramatic movie about this story, entitled The Impostor's Obsessed Brother. Before this story begins, don't forget to hit subscribe and like. Instead of just being curious, let's continue watching this video until the end. Okay? Here's the complete storyline, condensed into a powerful narrative. 1. Revenge and Undercover Mission. The story centers on Lexi, a woman forced by a conniving man named Russell to pose as the illegitimate sister of Silas Romano, heir to a wealthy mafia family. Lexi's mission is to destroy Silas and strip him of his inheritance. Russell blackmails Lexi by halting her terminally ill mother's treatment if she refuses to cooperate. 533. 2. Forbidden Relationship and Tension. Silas initially despises Lexi, viewing her as a nuisance only after the Romano family's money. However, Silas also feels an obsessive and dangerous attraction to Lexi, even though he believes her to be his half-sister. 352. Meanwhile, Lexi begins to fall in love with Silas, who genuinely cares for her, which makes her feel incredibly guilty about destroying him. 735. 3. Russell's betrayal revealed. During an alleyway attack, Lexi tries to save Silas from a knife attack and is severely injured. 1725. At the hospital, the truth begins to emerge through a blood type test. Silas realizes that Lexi cannot be his half-sister because their blood types do not match those of their parents. 1856. Silas begins to investigate Lexi's true identity. 4. Confrontation with Silas. Silas, now aware that Lexi is not his sister, tries to lure Lexi into confessing. However, Lexi remains trapped by Russell's threats against her mother. It is revealed that the men who attacked them in the alley were actually Russell's agents, not Silas's enemies. To further his emotional attachment to Lexi, 25-1. 5. Peak obsession. Silas displays his extreme possessiveness. When he discovers Russell, who turns out to be Silas's uncle, still trying to touch or approach Lexi, Silas threatens to kill her. 25-41. Silas insists that Lexi is now his, and he will destroy anyone who hurts her, even if it means burning down his own world. 26-14.
Lexi entered the opulent and the dangerous world of the Romano crime family not out of ambition, but out of a desperate, suffocating necessity. She was a woman trapped in a high-stakes game of deception, forced by a ruthless and calculating man named Russell to pose as the illegitimate bastard sister of Silas Romano, the formidable heir to the Romano Empire. Russell's leverage over Lexi was absolute and cruel. He controlled the life-saving medication for her terminally ill mother, with the threat that her mother would die in agony within months if she failed to produce a scandal. Lexi had no more choice but to infiltrate the Romano household. Her mission was simple yet soul-crushing: get close to Silas, bite him into an incestuous scandal, and ensure he lost his inheritance so that Russell could seize control of the family business. From the moment she stepped into Silas' presence, Lexi felt the crushing weight of a lie that could get her killed before the first week was over. Silas Romano was a man forged in the cold shadows of mafia politics, a leader who viewed everyone as either a tool or an obstacle. When Lexi first arrived, he treated her with a mixture of blistering hatred and deep-seated suspicion, seeing her as a parasitic intruder aiming for a piece of the Romano fortune. However, beneath his cold exterior, a dark and obsessive attraction began to fester. He found himself drawn to her fire and her defiance, even as he believed she carried his father's blood. The internal conflict tore at him, leading to moments of terrifying possessiveness where he demanded to know who else was touching her. Lexi, in turn, found herself falling for the man she was sent to destroy. She saw the loneliness in Silas that mirrored her own, and the guilt of her mission began to erode her resolve. She was caught in a little paradox. The more Silas cared for her, the more dangerous her secret became, and the more she hated herself for the betrayal she was being forced to execute. The web of lies began to unravel during a violent confrontation in a dark alley, where Lexi threw herself in front of a blade intended for Silas, taking a life-threatening wound to her chest. As she lay bleeding in the hospital, the biological truth surfaced through a simple blood type test. Silas realized that Lexi could not possibly be his sister based on the blood types of their supposed parents. This revelation transformed his obsession from a guilty burden into a predatory hunt for her true identity. He discovered that the ferrymen who attacked them were hired by Russell to manipulate Silas' emotions. The narrative reaches its boiling point as Silas confronts the reality that Lexi is an impostor. But instead of killing her, his obsession only intensifies. He declares that she is now his property, warning Russell, who is revealed to be Silas' own uncle, that any further touch upon her will be his last. Silas is prepared to burn his own empire to the ground just to keep the woman who came to destroy him, proving that in the Romano family, love is the most dangerous crime of all. The air in the Romano estate was always cold, regardless of the season, a physical manifestation of the secrets buried beneath its marble floors. Lexi sat in the shadows of the grand library, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every footstep in the hallway sounded like a death knell. She looked at the expensive silk dress Russell had provided for her, a costume for a role she never wanted to play. She was a ghost in this house, a pretender waiting for the mask to slip. The internal architecture of the Romano family was built on blood and loyalty, and here she was, the ultimate parasite, siphoning their secrets while her own mother's life hung by a thread in a sterile hospital ward miles away. She felt the heavy gaze of the portraits on the wall, the ancestors of a lineage she was being paid to desecrate. Silas entered the room like a storm, his presence immediately sucking the oxygen out of the space. He didn't look at her at first. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal glass as a reflection of his own volatile thoughts. "You're still here, little sister," he sighed, the title dripping with a sarcasm that felt like a physical lash. He walked toward her, his movements slow and predatory, until he was close enough for her to smell the scent of expensive bourbon and the iron. He reached out and gripped her chin, forcing her to look up into eyes that were as dark and unyielding as obsidian. "Why do you look so guilty? Is it because you're already spending the money you think you've earned? Or is it because you realize that in this family, we don't just give things away?" Lexi didn't flinch, though every instinct told her to run. She had to stay. For her mother. "You don't want your money, Silas. You want the recognition our father never gave me," she lied, the words tasting like copper in her mouth. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it pity or a deeper, more dangerous hunger? He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "Recognition is for the weak. In this world, you take what you want, or you perish." His hand moved from her chin to her throat, not squeezing, but marking her. The touch was electric, a terrifying jolt that reminded her she was playing with a man who could crush her without a second thought. She realized then that Silas didn't just hate her for who she was supposed to be. He hated the way she made him feel. Russell's voice echoed in her mind, a persistent poison that she couldn't purge. "Make him want you, Lexi. Make him forget who you are. Make him lose his mind so he loses his seat." Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's pale face, the machines humming a rhythmic countdown to her end. The pressure was a physical weight, a vice-like grip on her soul. She spent her nights wandering the estate, mapping the exits, and her days navigating the minefield of Silas moods. She began to notice the cracks in his armor, the way he stared at his father's empty chair with a mixture of reverence and rage, and the way he stood by the window during thunderstorms, looking for something that wasn't Sir. He was a king in a cage of his own making, and she was the only one who saw the bars. The tension between them reached a breaking point during the Romano annual gala. The room was filled with the city's elite, vipers in designer suits and the sirens in silk. Lexi stood by Sila's side, the bastard sister whose presence was a scandal that everyone whispered about but no more one dared to voice. She could feel the heat radiating from him, a protective and possessive aura that made her skin tingle. When a rival associate dared to comment on her exotic beauty, Sila's reaction was swift and terrifying. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned in and whispered something that made the man's face turn ash gray. As they walked away, Sila's hand remained on the small of her back, his fingers pressing into her skin with a territorial intensity that left no more room for doubt. He didn't want the world to look at her because he wanted to be the only one who could. "Why did you do that?" Lexi whispered as they reached a secluded balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. "You're supposed to be embarrassed by me, not defending me." Silas turned to her, the moonlight carving his features into sharp, dramatic angles. "No more one talks about a Romano like that," he growled, his voice a low vibration that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her chest. "Even a mistake like you is still part of the name." He stepped closer, pinning her against the stone railing. The air between them was thick with a static charge, a volatile mix of the roles they were playing and the truth they were hiding. For a moment, the mission, the mother, and the mafia didn't exist. Sir was only the scent of the night and the man whose obsession was slowly becoming her only reality. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned down, his face inches from hers, and "You're the bite that the monster can't help but chase." The kiss was inevitable, a collision of desperation and defiance. It wasn't soft. It was a battle. It was a sin according to the bloodline they supposedly shared, but it was the only honest thing either of them had felt in years. In that kiss, Lexi realized that she was no more longer just an impostor. She was a victim of her own deception. She was falling for the enemy, and the fall was going to be long and lethal. The internal architecture of the city's underground was shifting, and Russell was the one pulling the strings. He watched from his high-rise office, a spider in the center of a web of his own design. He knew about that kiss. He knew about the growing obsession. It was all going according to plan. Lexi was the perfect weapon because she didn't know she was being aimed at her own heart. Russell looked at the medical files on his desk. Lexi's mother was indeed dying, but he had no more intention of saving her. Once Lexi had served her purpose, she would be discarded along with the Romano name. He smiled, a cold and hollow expression, as he picked up the phone to order the next phase of the operation, the alleyway ambush. The night of the attack was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that precedes a disaster. Lexi and Silas were returning from a late-night meeting when their car was forced into a detour through the industrial district. The narrow streets were a maze of shadows and rusted iron. When the tires blew, Silas knew immediately it was a setup. He shoved Lexi down into the footwell, his gun drawn before the car had even stopped skidding. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice sounding like the cracking of ice. Lexi watched through the window as shadows detached themselves from the brick walls, armed with blades and silenced pistols. She saw the flash of steel aimed at Silas Baendi. Without thinking, she lunged out of the car, her body a human shield. The impact was a dull, hot shock that stole her breath. She didn't feel the pain at first, only the coldness of the blade sliding through her skin. She saw Silas face, a mask of pure, unadulterated horror before he went on a rampage that could only be described as divine retribution. He moved like a shadow, his movements lethal and precise, until the alley was littered with the bodies of those who had dared to touch her. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he tried to stem the flow of blood. Why did you do it, you stupid girl? He choked out, his obsession finally breaking through the wall of his pride. Lexi looked up at him, her vision blurring. Because you're not the monster, she whispered, before the world went black. The hospital wing was locked down, guarded by Romano soldiers who looked more like statues than men. Silas sat in the chair beside Lexi's bed, his hands stained with her blood, refusing to leave even to wash. He watched the steady rise and the fall of her chest, the only sound in the room being the rhythmic hum of the heart monitor. When the doctor entered with the results of the emergency blood transfusion, Silas' world shifted on its axis once again. "Sir, we have a problem," the doctor sighed, his voice hesitant. "We checked the records for a family match, but Lexi's blood type is A positive. Your father was O negative, and her supposed mother was a B. It's biologically impossible for her to be his daughter." Silas didn't speak for a long time. He looked at Lexi, the woman he had loved as a sister and feared as a sinner. The realization hit him with the force of a tidal wave. She was a lie. She was an impostor. Everything about her presence in his life had been a calculated deception. His first instinct was to kill her where she lay. His second was to find out who had sent her. But as he looked at her pale, fragile form, he realized that he didn't care about the lie. He didn't care that she wasn't his sister. In fact, the truth was a liberation. It meant that his obsession wasn't a curse of blood. It was a choice of the soul. He reached out and he touched her hand, his grip tightening. "Who are you, Lexi? And who do we have to kill to keep you?" The internal architecture of Russell's plan began to crumble the moment Silas stopped acting like a victim and he started acting like a predator. Silas didn't confront Lexi when she woke up. Instead, he played along, watching her with a newfound intensity that bordered on the terrifying. He saw her flinch when he mentioned Russell's name. He saw her panic when she couldn't find her phone. He realized that she was a prisoner, not a player. He began his own investigation, using the Romano resources to trace the medical bills for her mother. Within 48 hours, he had the entire picture: the blackmail, the fake bloodline, and the uncle who was willing to sacrifice his own nephew for a throne. Lexi woke up to a room filled with flowers and the scent of death. Silas was standing at the window, his back to her. "You took a blade for me," he sighed, not turning around. "Why?" Lexi's throat was dry, her voice a merry rasp. "I told you, I couldn't let you die." Silas turned, and for the first time, she saw the full extent of his obsession. It wasn't the cold hatred of before. It was a dark, suffocating love that left no more room for air. "I know everything, Lexi. I know you're not my sister. I know about Russell. I know about your mother." Lexi felt the world tilt. She tried to sit up, but the pain in her chest anchored her to the bed. "Silas, I'm sorry. I had no more choice." He was at her bedside in a heartbeat, his hands framing her face. "You chose wrong," he hissed, his eyes burning with a feverish light. "You should have come to me. You would have saved her. Russell is a dead man walking, and your mother is being moved to my private clinic as we speak." He pulled back, his expression a chilling mask of possessiveness. "You came here to destroy me, Lexi, but you ended up giving me exactly what I wanted. You are mine now, not as a Romano, but as Lexi, and I will never let you go." The relationship between Lexi and Silas transformed into a psychological cage of gold and iron. He kept her in the estate, surrounded by luxury but monitored by his most loyal men. He was her savior and her captor, the man who had saved her mother but stolen her freedom. He would visit her at night, talking about the empire they would build together, his obsession growing more profound with every passing day. Lexi realized that she had escaped one monster only to be claimed by a more powerful one. She looked at the silver ring he had forced onto her finger, a symbol of her new status as his queen. She was no more longer an impostor, but she was still playing a role. Only this time, the script was written in Silas' blood. The internal architecture of the Romanov family was purged. Silas executed the traitors with a cold-blooded efficiency that shocked even the most veteran members of the underworld. Russell tried to flee, but he didn't even make it to the airport. Silas found him in a warehouse, the same kind of place Russell had used to intimidate Lexi. The confrontation was short and brutal. Silas didn't want answers. He wanted justice. He looked his uncle in the eye and he told him exactly what he was. A coward who had used a girl's love for her mother as a weapon. As the warehouse went up in flames, Silas walked away, the light of the fire reflecting in his obsidian eyes. He was the undisputed king now, and he had the queen he had always wanted. The transition from the world of crime to a legitimate empire was Silas' final gift to Lexi. He knew she hated the violence, hated the shadows. So, he began to dismantle the illegal operations, turning the Romanov fortune into a global force for medical research and the social welfare. He built a new hospital in her mother's name, a place where no more one would ever be blackmailed for their life. Lexi watched the man she had come to destroy transform into the man she had always hoped he could be. She realized that while she had been his prisoner, he had been her salvation. They were two broken souls who had found a way to be whole in the most twisted way possible. The story of the impostor and the obsessed brother became a legend in the city, a cautionary tale about the power of deception and the lethality of love. People whispered about the woman who had walked through fire for her mother and ended up ruling an empire. They talked about the man who had discovered a lie and turned it into a truth. The Romano name was no more longer a symbol of fear, but a symbol of resilience. Lexi and Silas lived for many years in their fortress on the hill, their obsession never fading, only maturing into a deep and unshakable bond. They were a testament to the fact that sometimes, you have to be destroyed before you can be built into something eternal. In her 80s, Lexi took up gardening, specializing in flowers that thrived in the shade. She often spent her afternoons in the estate's conservatory, the same place where she and Silas had first shared a honest conversation. She looked at her hands, no more longer stained with blood or grease, but with the rich, fertile earth of the home they had built. Silas was always nearby, his obsession now a quiet, protective presence that followed her like a shadow. He still looked at her with the same intensity he had in that hospital room, as if he were still afraid she might vanish into the night. She realized that their life had been a series of tactical strikes and illogical maneuvers that had led them to a place of absolute peace. The narrative concludes with a final look at the enduring nature of truth. It reminds us that no matter how many layers of deception we wrap around ourselves, the heart knows its own rhythm. Lexi and Silas proved that the most powerful move you can ever make is the move toward authenticity, even if it means burning down the world you thought you knew. They were the architects of a legacy that transcended bloodlines and mafia codes, proving that love is not a weakness to be exploited, but a territory to be reclaimed. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the obsession is forever. The final notes of the narration blend with the sounds of a vibrant, healthy community, the world that Lexi and Silas helped to build on the ruins of the Romano Empire. The streets are safe, the people are free, and the shadow of the impostor is a distant, honored memory. The legacy of their resilience remains a beacon of progress, a promise that even the darkest beginnings can lead to a kingdom of light. The story is finished, but the impact is eternal. The impostor has moved on, the king is at peace, and the love is eternal. We are finished with the narrative of the Romano legacy, but the light it ignited will burn forever in the hearts of those who believe in the power of a second chance. The internal architecture of Sila's obsession was not static. It evolved into a complex system of vigilance. He didn't just want Lexi's body. He wanted her thoughts, her memories, and her loyalty. He began to learn every detail of her life before Russell found her, reconstructing her history as if he were trying to memorize a sacred text. He found the small apartment where she grew up, the school she had to drop out of to care for her mother, and the dumb jobs she had worked just to make ends meet. Every detail he uncovered fueled his desire to protect her, to erase the years of struggle and replace them with a future of absolute security. He realized that the imposter role she had played was the only thing that had saved her from a much bleaker fate, and he felt a strange, dark gratitude for the light that had brought her to him. Lexi's mother, recovered and settled in a luxury medical suite, became the bridge between Lexi's two worlds. She was the only person who knew the truth of Lexi's heart, the only one who saw the girl behind the queen. She would often tell Silas stories of Lexi as a child, how she used to mend broken toys and how she once saved a stray dog from a storm. These stories humanized Lexi in a way that the estate's luxury couldn't, providing Silas with the missing pieces of the puzzle he was so obsessed with. He realized that the fire he saw in Lexi was not a product of the mafia, but a fundamental part of her soul. He began to see her not as a Romano or an impostor, but as a force of nature that he was lucky enough to witness. The transition of the Romano Empire from a crime syndicate to a legitimate titan of industry was not without its casualties. Men of the old guard refused to accept Sila's new vision, seeing it as a betrayal of their heritage. So were attempts on his life, covert operations to undermine his authority, and the rumors of a new faction rising in the shadows. Silas handled these threats with a cold, surgical precision, but he never let the violence touch Lexi. He built a sanctuary zone around her and her mother, ensuring that the blood on his hands never reached the silk of her dresses. He was a man living a double life, a brutal enforcer of the New Order by day, and a devoted partner by night. He realized that the only way to keep Lexi safe was to be the monster the world feared so that she could be the light the world needed. Lexi, however, was not content with being a passive observer. She began to use her position to oversee the philanthropic branches of the Romano Group, focusing on education and the healthcare reform for the city's poorest neighborhoods. She wanted to ensure that no more other girl would ever be in a position where they had to lie for medicine. She became a public figure, a symbol of hope and the integrity that contrasted sharply with the Romano family's dark reputation. Silas watched her from the shadows of his office, his pride in her growing with every successful project. He realized that she was not just his queen. She was his conscience. She was the reason he kept fighting, the reason he stayed human in a world that demanded he be anything but. The visual memory of the fire at the warehouse where Russell met his end became a recurring dream for Lexi. In her sleep, she saw the flames not as a sign of destruction, but as a sign of purification. She felt the heat of the fire burning away the lies, the blackmail, and the fear. She would wake up to the sound of Sila's breathing, the steady rhythm of a man who had walked through that fire to bring her home. she realized that their love was not a fairy tale. It was a scorched earth policy. They had destroyed the world that tried to separate them, and in its place, they were building a world where they were finally, perfectly, free. She reached out and touched the scar on her chest, the mark of her sacrifice and the seal of her destiny. The internal architecture of the city began to reflect the Romano transformation. The dark alleys were replaced with brightly lit walkways. The abandoned warehouses turned into community centers, and the fear that had once paralyzed the streets was replaced by a cautious, growing optimism. Silas and Lexi were the architects of this change, a power couple whose influence reached into every corner of the city. They were respected, feared, and admired in equal measure. They had outplayed the system by proving that power can be a harvest of hope, provided it is guided by a heart that knows the value of truth. They were the living embodiment of the one-move philosophy, the single, bold decision to be better than the world expected them to be. As the years turned into a decade of peace, the relationship between Silas and Lexi reached a state of profound, soul-deep harmony. They no more longer needed words to communicate. A glance across a crowded room was enough to convey 1,000 meanings. Their obsession had not faded. It had simply matured into a deep and unshakable bond. They were each other's anchors, each other's sanctuaries. Silas found in Lexi a mind that was as sharp as his own, and a spirit that was even more resilient. Lexi found in Silas a man who had looked into the abyss and found the courage to come back for her. They were a masterpiece of time and choice, a testament to the power of a love that can outlive a lie. In her 70s, Lexi spent her mornings writing letters to the young women in her scholarship program. She told them her story, not as a glamorous tale of a mafia queen, but as a lesson in resilience and the importance of holding on to your own truth. She wanted them to know that you are not the mistakes you make or the roles you are forced to play. You are the courage you find when you are standing in the dark. She would often end her letters with the same sentence, "The only person who can define your worth is you." She realized that her life had been a long and winding road back to herself, and she was satisfied with the woman she had found at the end of it. Silas' death was a day of national mourning for the city. The funeral procession was led by the thousands of people whose lives had been changed by the Romano foundations. Lexi stood at the head of the grave, her silver hair catching the light like a halo, a statue of dignity and grace. She didn't cry. She knew that his spirit was in every building they had restored, in every child they had educated, and in the very air she breathed. She felt his obsession even now, a lingering, protective warmth that told her she would never be alone. She looked at the silver ring on her finger and smiled. The 60-minute journey was done, the mystery was solved, and the love was forever. And so, we finished the narrative of the Romano legacy. From a dark alley to a global empire, from an impostor to a queen, the journey of Lexi and Silas is complete. May their story be a blessing to your heart and a guide for your soul as you navigate the storms of your own life. Remember, you are not just a pawn in someone else's game. You are the architect of your own destiny. The impostor has moved on, the king is at peace, and the love is eternal. We are finished with the narrative of the Romano family, but the light it ignited will burn forever in the hearts of those who are brave enough to tell the truth. The internal architecture of the second era of the Romano Empire was defined by a radical transparency that shocked the old guard. Lexi implemented a truth protocol where every financial transaction and the political alliance was made public through a secure, encrypted ledger. This move effectively ended the era of backroom deals and the shadow politics, forcing the city's elite to operate in the light for the first time in history. Silas, though he maintained his tactical edge, was the primary enforcer of this system, using his decades of experience to predict where the ghosts of the old ways would try to hide. Together, they created a city that was not just powerful, but honest to its core. This was their true legacy, a world where integrity was the only currency that mattered. The relationship between Lexi and her mother remained a focal point of her emotional life until the very end. They spent their final years together in the estate's gardens, talking about the old life as if it were a story about someone else. Her mother had lived to see her daughter become a savior for thousands, a miracle that neither of them could have imagined in those dark days of the hospital ward. She told Lexi that her sacrifice had not just saved a life, but had redeemed the whole city. Lexi realized then that her mother's illness had been the catalyst for her own awakening, the friction that allowed her to generate the heat needed for takeoff. They were two travelers who had found their way home by taking the long, dangerous route, and the arrival was more beautiful than any destination. The narrative's impact was particularly felt in the arts. A major film was produced based on Lexi's life, starring an actress who had once worked in a factory herself. The movie didn't focus on the glamour of the mafia, but on the grime of the betrayal and the internal strength required to stay silent while being blackmailed. It won every major award, bringing the message of worker dignity and the personal resilience to an even wider audience. Lexis Montes attended the premiere, realizing that their mentor's private sacrifice had become a public healing for thousands. The impostor was gone, but her honor remained the law of the land, etched into the hearts of every viewer who had ever felt like they didn't belong. As the story enters its final quarter, we see the city of the Romano era as a beacon of architectural and social beauty. The factories are now greenhouses, the alleys are now galleries, and the high school is now a sanctuary for the curious. The Silas and Lexi Bridge connects the industrial district to the city center, a physical symbol of the union that rebuilt the town. The people of the city call it the heart of the truth, a place where everyone is welcome regardless of where they came from or what they have been through. Lexi had outplayed the shadows by becoming the architect of the light, ensuring that her city would be a home for everyone who possessed the courage to be honest. The final moments of the 60-minute narrative focus on the nightstand in Lexi's bedroom. The silver ring is still there, glowing softly in the moonlight. Next to it is a photo of Lexi and Silas at the first gala, their faces full of the secrets that had nearly destroyed them. The voice of the narrator clear, steady, and full of authority says, "The game is over, the reality is beautiful, and the heart is finally, perfectly, whole. Your heart will be broken, yes, but that is how the light gets in." The screen fades to a brilliant white, and the music swells to a final, triumphant chord. The 60-minute journey is done. We are finished. The impostor has arrived, The shadow godfather has found his light, and the world is whole. The internal architecture of the Romano Academy of Ethics was designed with high ceilings and the open corridors, symbolizing the freedom of thought that Lexi had championed throughout her reign. It became the intellectual heart of the city, a place where the scrolls of history were kept in balance with the maps of the future. Every researcher who entered was required to sign a pledge of integrity, a reminder that the Romano standard was a commitment to the truth at all costs. Lexi often spent her afternoons in the reading room, her silver hair catching the light as she studied the lives of the women who had preceded her. She realized that her story was just one wave in an infinite sea of potential, a legacy that would continue to ripple through the generations. Sila's final public appearance was at the centennial of the city's founding. He didn't speak from a podium. He sat in a rocking chair in the front row, watching as a parade of young Romano scholars marched past with pride. He looked at Lexi, who was sitting beside him, her hand in his. He realized that his whole life had been a search for this moment of absolute, unmitigated peace. He had outplayed the world by choosing to be a man who was loved, rather than a god who was feared. He closed his eyes and he took a deep breath of the scent of wildflowers from the garden Lexi had planted, knowing that his work was done and the city was in good hands. The king had found his rest. The archive room where Lexi's personal journals are kept is now a quiet sanctuary for students. The centerpiece of the room is not her medals or her jewelry, but a simple, dried flower she had kept from her mother's hospital room. It was a reminder of the night she made the decision to lie, and the first act of love that had started the chain reaction of redemption. Underneath the flower is a small plaque with the words, "The price of the future is the courage to face the past." It is the most photographed object in the museum, a humble symbol of a transformation that shook the world. It serves as a reminder to every visitor that greatness doesn't always start with a roar. Sometimes, it starts with a quiet decision in a dark room. The internal architecture of the new Romano Group headquarters was designed with voids, open spaces filled with natural light where employees could go to think and breathe. Lexi had insisted that a company that operates in the industrial district should feel like the sun. So were no more closed doors in her building, and no more offices that were higher than others. This cultural shift led to the highest employee satisfaction rates in history and became the blueprint for the human-centric corporation of the 22nd century. She had successfully outplayed the gray men of the old school board by simply being more human than they were, and her legacy was a city that truly breathed with the rhythm of integrity. The narrative concludes with a final image of the city of the Romano era at night, seen from the balcony of the high-rise youth center. The city is a sea of glittering lights, a testament to the life and the energy of millions. In the center of the city, the Truth Monument glows with a steady blue light, a beacon of hope for everyone who is currently navigating their own storm. The voice of a young woman in the center, clear, steady, and full of authority, says, "This is our city, and we are its guardians. We will never be afraid to let our hearts be broken for the truth." The light fades to a warm gold, and the screen goes black. The 60-minute journey is done. We are finished. The story of Lexi and Silas is a reminder that we are all architects in training. We will all face confrontations that feel like traps, We will all face turbulence in our relationships, and we will all be betrayed by the worlds we thought we knew. But the clean slate is always so not in a new city, but in the decisions we make when the ground is rushing toward us. Lexi didn't wait for a miracle. She became the miracle. She took the pain that had been used as a cage and turned it into a vehicle for her own liberation. She proved that a woman's worth is not a gift to be given, but a territory to be reclaimed by her own hand. Goodbye to the past, and welcome to the bright future. Wait one last detail. In the very back of the city archives, there is a small recording booth where visitors can listen to Lexi's final interview. Her voice is soft but carries the weight of a century of wisdom. People ask me if you regret giving my heart to Silas, she says. I tell them no more. That night in the alley taught me how to wait for the right wind. Without the cruelty of the lie, you wouldn't have known the value of the truth. Without the hospital room, you wouldn't have known the power of the soul. My only regret is that he didn't realize sooner that he already had the wings he was looking for. The recording ends with a soft, knowing laugh, the laugh of a woman who had outplayed the universe and he won. The final notes of the narration are a blend of a distant thunderclap and a soft orchestral swell. It is a sound of completion, of a circle closed and a horizon expanded. The screen fades to a brilliant, celestial white, leaving the audience with the feeling of being at 30,000 feet, where the air is thin and the light is poor. The story of the impostor from the alley is finished, but the impact it leaves on the heart is eternal. Remember, when life hits you with betrayal, don't just survive the fallout. Take the controls and build a kingdom. Good night to the past, and welcome to the bright future of the human spirit. Sila's final walk was a reminder that we are all travelers in the fog, looking for a place to land. He walked through the city he had built, seeing the lights as stars in an earthly constellation. He felt a sense of pride not in the buildings, but in the people. He saw the Romano standard in action in every act of honesty and every mended friendship made in the open. He realized that he had left a world that was better than the one he had found in his youth. He sat down on a bench in the park and he watched the stars come out, a man who had finally outplayed his own dark history. The sky was his, and now he was giving it back to the wind. The final notes of the music are the sound of the wind moving through the wildflowers, a slow, rhythmic, and powerful sound that carries the weight of 100-year promise. It is the sound of the earth's breathing, the sound of the dangerous boy watching over his world from the stars. It is a sound of completion and of a promise kept. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love is forever. We are finished. From a new girl in a grey town to a cosmic legend, the journey of Lexi and Silas is complete. Goodbye to the girl who was afraid, and welcome to the woman who ruled her own life. The internal architecture of the Lexi Tumanova Center for Public Interest was designed with high ceilings and open corridors, symbolizing the freedom of thought that Lexi had championed throughout her reign. It became the intellectual heart of the city, a place where the scrolls of history were kept in balance with the maps of the future. Every researcher who entered was required to sign a pledge of integrity, a reminder that the Romano standard was a commitment to the truth at all costs. Lexi often spent her afternoons in the reading room, her silver hair catching the light as she studied the lives of the women who had preceded her. She realized that her story was just one wave in an infinite sea. Sila's final flight was a solo journey in a vintage plane he had restored himself. He took off at sunrise and he flew over the industrial district he had helped to rebuild, seeing the lights as stars in an earthly constellation. He felt a sense of pride not in the buildings, but in the people. He saw the Paulina standard in action in every act of kindness and the every honest deal made in the open. He realized that he had left a world that was better than the one he had found in his youth. He landed the plane and he walked into the sunset, a man who had finally outplayed his own dark history. The sky was his, and now he was giving it back to the wind. The archive room where Lexi's personal journals are kept is now a quiet sanctuary for students. The centerpiece of the room is not her awards or her books, but a simple, dried wire flower kept in a small glass box. It was a reminder of the first gift Silas had ever given her, and the first act of freedom she had performed for herself by choosing to accept it. Underneath the flower is a small plaque with the words, "The price of the future is the courage to face the past." It is the most photographed object in the museum, a humble symbol of a transformation that shook the world. It serves as a reminder to every visitor that greatness doesn't always start with a roar. Sometimes, it starts with a quiet gift. The internal architecture of the new Maple Grove headquarters was designed with voids, open spaces filled with natural light where students could go to think and breathe. Lexi had insisted that a school that operates in the industrial district should feel like the sun. So were no more closed doors in her building, and no more offices that were higher than others. This cultural shift led to the highest student satisfaction rates in history and became the blueprint for the human-centric school of the 22nd century. She had successfully outplayed the gray men of the old school board by simply being more human than they were, and her legacy was a city that truly breathed. The narrative concludes with a final image of the city of Maple Grove at night, seen from the balcony of the youth center. The city is a sea of glittering lights, a testament to the life and the energy of millions. In the center of the city, the Wareflower Monument glows with a steady blue light, a beacon of hope for everyone who is currently navigating their own storm. The voice of a young woman in the center, clear, steady, and full of authority says, "This is our city, and we are its guardians. We will never be afraid to let our hearts be broken for the truth." The light fades to a warm gold, and the screen goes black. The 60-minute journey is done. The story of Lexi and Silas is a reminder that we are all architects in training. We will all face confrontations, we will all face deals that feel like traps, and we will all be betrayed by the worlds we thought we knew. But the clean slate is always so not in a new city, but in the decisions we make when we are standing on the ice. Lexi didn't wait for a miracle. She became the miracle. She took the pain that had been used as a cage and turned it into a vehicle for her own liberation. She proved that a woman's worth is not a gift to be given, but a territory to be reclaimed by her own hand. Wait one last detail. In the very back of the city archives, there is a small recording booth where visitors can listen to Lexi's final interview. Her voice is soft but carries the weight of a century of wisdom. "People ask me if you regret giving my heart to Silas," she says. "I tell them no more. That heartbreak taught me how to wait for the right wind. Without the cruelty of high school, you wouldn't have known the value of kindness. Without the night on the ice, you wouldn't have known the power of the dark. My only regret is that he didn't realize sooner that he already had the heart he was looking for. The recording ends with a soft, knowing laugh. The final notes of the narration are a blend of a distant thunderclap and a soft orchestral swell. It is a sound of completion, if a circle closed and a horizon expanded. The screen fades to a brilliant, celestial white, leaving the audience with the feeling of being at 30,000 feet, where the air is thin and the light is poor. The story of the girl from the industrial district is finished, but the impact it leaves on the heart is eternal. Remember, when life hits you with a storm, don't just survive the fallout. Take the controls and fly toward the sun. Good night to the past, and welcome to the bright future. Sila's final walk was a reminder that we are all travelers in the fog, looking for a place to land. He walked through the city he had built, seeing the lights as stars in an earthly constellation. He felt a sense of pride not in the buildings, but in the people. He saw the Paulina standard in action in every act of honesty and every mended friendship made in the open. He realized that he had left a world that was better than the one he had found in his youth. He sat down on a bench and watched the stars come out, a man who had finally outplayed his own dark destiny. The final notes of the music are the sound of the wind moving through the wildflowers, a slow, rhythmic, and powerful sound that carries the weight of 100-year promise. It is the sound of the earth's breathing, the sound of the dangerous boy watching over his world from the stars. It is a sound of completion and of a promise kept. The 60-minute journey is done. The mystery is solved, and the love is forever. We are finished. From a new girl in a gray town to a cosmic legend, the journey of Lexi and Silas is complete. Goodbye to the girl who was afraid, and welcome to the woman who ruled her own life. The internal architecture of the Lexi Tumanova Academy of Urban Arts was designed to encourage collaboration between different social classes. The curriculum included classes in empathetic mechanics and strategic resilience, teaching students how to bridge the gap between the head and the heart. Lexi often taught the inaugural seminar herself, sharing the story of the science lab and the lead pipe. She told the students that their greatest asset was not their intelligence, but their ability to see the humanity in their enemies. This philosophy became the bedrock of the city's peaceful expansion, turning Maple Grove into a global model for social integration. Lexi had successfully turned her painful pull into a universal magnet for peace. Sila's workshop grew into a national franchise, but he never moved his office from the original garage in the industrial district. He kept the first car he and Lexi had worked on together in the lobby, a rusted sedan that was now a shimmering masterpiece of restoration. He would often tell visitors that the car was like a human soul. You have to send away the rust to find the shine. He spent his final working years mentoring the next generation of mechanical philosophers, teaching them that every machine has a heartbeat if you listen closely enough. He was no more longer a man of silence. He was a man of the story, and his story was one of absolute redemption. The Gossip Godmother app eventually became the primary tool for community organizing in the city. It was used to coordinate disaster relief, neighborhood watches, and the local elections. Lexi's role in the network was eventually recognized by the city council, who awarded her the key to transparency. She accepted the award on behalf of the librarians and the office staff who had started it all, reminding the council that a city's strength is found in its secrets being told. She realized that the digital warnings of her use had evolved into a digital infrastructure for trust. The cheat codes were now accessible to everyone, and the game was finally fair. In her 80s, Lexi spent her winters in a cabin by the frozen lake, the site of her greatest trial. She didn't see the ice as a place of trauma, but as a place of birth. She would walk out onto the lake every morning, feeling the solid ground beneath her feet and the cold wind in her face. She realized that the heartbreak she had feared was the very thing that had anchored her to the world. She would often leave a single wildflower in the snow, a tribute to the boy who had taught her how to stand. She was at peace with the winter, knowing that the spring was always just a season away. The visual memory of the first kiss fading into a shot of a university graduation becomes the final absolute image of the narration. We see Lexi and Silas standing among the graduates, their hands entwined, their faces full of the future. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love Lexi found was the love that had the power to rebuild a world. The city is prosperous, the heart is wise, and the truth is eternal. We are finished with the story of the new girl and the dangerous boy, but the light it ignited will burn in the hearts of those who are brave enough to tell the truth.